So I was asked to speak about pathworking, and bit of a difficult, complicated topic. Well, not really difficult and complicated, just how different people view it and perceive it and interpret and define it. So I just wanted to have a look at that in a little bit more depth and try and get some kind of perspective on it. So let's have a look at that. Good day and welcome back to my channel and my videos. And if you'd like to support the channel, please do the usual stuff. Like if you haven't, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when videos are coming out. And you can also comment and share, which also helps. And if you'd like to join one of the tiers, one of the memberships, just hit the join button. There's the standard just normal support, and then the Demonic Wealth Web and the weekly meditation classes. And you can also hit the super thanks if a particular video actually helps you a lot. So lots of ways to support. Anyway, so today is pathworking. Now, when we think of pathworking or when we talk about pathworking, it's a particular magical method which engages the imagination. And we have pathworking, we have guided meditation. Now, the two do differ. The difficulty and the problem here is how people actually interpret and define the two different aspects. And to say that pathworking is definitively X and guided meditation is definitively Y, I find a bit difficult. I have my own interpretations, and I think a lot of other people have their own interpretations. So it's one of those cases of just make up your own mind. At the end of the day, you are using a particular thing which guides you through a particular scenery, through a particular set of imagery in order to attain a goal. Whether you want to call it pathworking, guided meditation, or storytelling, it's up to you. But let's just have a look at some of the aspects. So I did go and do a little, or a very quick internet dive into different stream pathworking, guided meditation. And I mean, the one website I came across gave quite an interesting description and definition of each one, and then gave examples of a pathworking and an example of a guided meditation, and quite frankly I could not tell the difference. In other scenarios, people will say that guided meditation is purely being guided by a teacher who is taking you through an actual meditation. So you may do a silent meditation where you are clearing the mind, trying to attain samadhi, emptiness, etc., 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 where you actually just sit down, you do a silent meditation in particular techniques that you actually use to do that. The guided meditation is the same thing, except you are being guided through the meditation. You're being told to breathe in a certain way, to focus on a particular thing and concentrate on a particular aspect or thought or a particular area of the body and things like that. So it's the actual silent meditation, but taken through that silent meditation with a guide who is speaking to you and guiding you through the process itself. On the other end of that scale is the pathworking, and some people will call these guided meditations, being that you are being guided through a particular scenery, and that scenery is one where you're taken on a journey into a field, along a path, you come across a cottage, etc., etc., etc. So there's particular imagery and particular visualization that engages your imagination rather than doing a silent meditation and being guided through that particular silent meditation. So some people will call that guided meditation, other people will call that purely pathworking. However, in this instance, we have some disagreements from some people. You know, if we look at Theodore Rowe's Lucifer and the Hidden Demons, that particular fashion in which the imagination is engaged is different to something that you may come across from other people who are doing pathworkings. And the two examples I'm going to give you here are Theodore Rowe's Lucifer and the Hidden Demons, and Phil Hines, Condensed Chaos. I've got both of their books on my tablet here, so I'm going to read some stuff for you and show you why there is this whole confusion. But basically a pathworking is engaging your imagination, but engaging your sensory perceptions as well. So you'll be taken through particular scenery which engages your senses in a particular way. So you may have to touch something and feel it, you may have to smell something, you may have to feel the breeze or the wind on your skin. So it brings about this sensory perception which doesn't only engage imagination and sensory perception, but also memory. And that memory can often be cultural and personal. So, you know, in some cases, you may have somebody who is walking through a field of golden barley, wheat, something like that. But, you know, this is actually mentioned in Theodore Rowe's book, wheat comes with disease. But the memory that we have is this field of golden wheat and golden barley. And it brings about a sense of abundance and prosperity and things like that. So there's that memory trigger that happens. And it might not be the same for everybody, and this is where things can get sometimes a little bit difficult. So if you are going to go on a pathworking, make sure that it's one that you can engage with, and one that you have the correct response to. You know, the Theodore Rowe's book is actually pretty damn good, if you ask me. The guided or the pathworkings in there are very specific, and they aren't taking you on a journey from, you know, starting at point A and progressively walking to point B. They are taking you on a journey in the sense of you bring about a visualization in your imagination at point A. And then you skip to point B into that visualization. Then you skip to point C into that visualization. So there's no walking along a path. It's simply going from point A to point B to point C to point D, etc., 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 till you get to the place that you need to be at. So there are, as I say, there are different ways to view pathworking, to consider them, to use them, to engage them. And Phil Hines actually specifically speaks about 3 different types of pathworking, which are very valid and very interesting. So let's just have a look at some of the stuff that these guys are saying. Now, when it comes to Theodore Rowe's, he does have quite a bit to say about how pathworking is an ancient method of ritual. And it was taken in the 70s and 80s by the New Agers and completely abstracted and changed and whatnot. I haven't gone into where the roots of pathworking are, as mentioned in Theodore Rowe's book. He has some pretty interesting things to say. He also kind of carries on about the 70s and 80s and the New Age people who abstracted it a bit too much. And in regard to that, you know, chaos magic came out of the 70s and 80s. And we're going to next go on to Phil Hines. So it's possible he's actually referring to chaos magic itself, to Peter J. Carroll and Ray Sherwin and Phil Hines, etc., etc. But I think that those people have some good things to say about pathworking. Rose says, in earlier times, pathworking was a method employed by certain occultists to walk the paths on the tree of life mentally. It was considered an act of utmost secrecy and potential danger. This is more of a Merkaba journey, where you're actually using, if you look at the tree of life, in between each Sephirah is a path. And you can journey from Sephirah to Sephirah along the path. And a lot of people say that this is where pathworking originated. Rose disagrees with that. He actually says that it's a lot older than what came out of modern Kabbalah. There's speculation about all these things. People are going to agree and disagree about things. It's how it has been, always has been, always will be. But, as I said, this is one of those things you really need to make your own mind up about what the facts are. If you want to actually get into where things originate from, where pathworking originates from, or if you just want to use a technique that gets you to where you want to go to and accomplishes the task that you actually need to do. So Rose goes into very specific things about the history, but then says that he's not going to get into it because there's not enough room and space and time and motivation to do that. So who knows? But I just want to give you an example of, Theodore Rose's method of pathworking. So I'm going to go through the pathworking itself as pertaining to Lucifer. So what you would do is, as far as I remember, it's not actually mentioned in the book, but I found the best way to use these pathworkings in the book, in Theodore Rose's book, Lucifer and the Hidden Demons, is to get yourself into a trance state. So don't just sit down and read the first sentence and, visualize it, and then read the second sentence and visualize it. Get yourself into a trance state so you're actually shifting into these planes of existence rather than just imagining something. It's going to work a lot better for you. In fact, I think Rose actually just does say, just sit down and just, read the first sentence and visualize it. It's going to work a lot better if you do get yourself into a trance state. It doesn't have to be a deep one. It's just take about 10 minutes to just sit still, try and clear the mind in a normal meditative state where you're going into a light trance, and then start going through the visualizations. Just one note here: if you do suffer from aphantasia, in a lot of magical practices we talk about imagination being a cornerstone. It's one of the most important tools you've got. Imagination doesn't necessarily, and it's the same with when we talk about seeing with a capital S, it doesn't necessarily strictly pertain to seeing as we think of physically seeing with our eyes. So when we say imagine, we immediately think that we have to see a thing in front of us. Imagine an apple. So close your eyes and imagine an apple. Can you see the apple? If you can't, you may have some degree or level of aphantasia. If you have complete aphantasia, you're not going to be able to see this at all or visualize it. But imagination and seeing are a lot deeper than that. So when we talk about imagination, imagine something. If we're saying visualize something, that's a different story. But imagine something can engage all of your senses or particular senses or different senses. So if we say imagine something, imagine yourself walking down a path which is going through a forest and you come to a cottage. Now, if you were reading a fiction book and you were reading this particular thing happening to the character in the book, how would you actually imagine it? How would you interact with that character, interact with that storytelling? Some people are going to they're going to visualize it, they're going to see it in their mind's eye. Some people are going to experience it in a different fashion. It could be a different sense. It could be you might have a developed sense of hearing. So as you're reading, you may actually hear the footsteps. You may hear the door open. Some people may actually get scents and smells from the surroundings that they are imagining. So think of it in those terms. If you were reading a fiction book and the character was taking a particular journey, how do you interact with that character and that particular storytelling? How do you imagine? And so do the same thing when you're doing a pathworking. It's difficult, there's so many people out there who imagine on different levels and different scales, and yeah, sure, it's something you can develop. People who have complete aphantasia, I'm not completely sure if they can develop it, but somebody who does battle to visualize an apple or visualize a cube or whatever it is when they close their eyes, they may not have aphantasia. It's just a skill that they haven't developed. So explore it, find out what works for you, but don't think that just because you cannot visualize, that you cannot do these things, you cannot do pathworkings, or you cannot do magic. You can. There are different ways of viewing things, of perceiving things, and of actually using tools and techniques. All right. So I don't want to get too much into that. I think I just did, but let's stop there then. All right. So when you're taking these pathworkings out of Rose's book, as I say, get yourself into a light trance state so you can shift into these visualizations or these imaginatory scenes a lot easier, and you are in more of a favorable state in order to actually do it. So for Lucifer particularly, because you always start with Lucifer in this scenario, the first sentence is, you stand in a rock-strewn desert. So you are in a rock-strewn desert. You visualize that. Okay. Then once you've got that set, you go on to the next sentence. There are mountains on the horizon. So you look up and you see mountains on the horizon. Okay, got that. Next one, you stand at the base of the mountains. So you're not walking from this rock-strewn desert. You're not walking along a path to the mountains, because they are way in the distance. You are literally going, you are transporting, you are teleporting from position A to position B. So you're going from this rock-strewn desert, you look up, you see the mountains in the distance, and then you go, boop, and now you're at the base of the mountains. Okay? So this is a very particular way of doing pathworking. And this is the type of pathworking that people will say is pathworking, whereas other methods are guided meditation. So just want you to be aware of what people are trying to actually communicate when they talk about pathworking or guided meditation in this fashion of taking an actual journey. Then from you're now at the base of the mountains, the next one is there, a black tree, its bark scorched. Okay, so where? Just there. So you just all of a sudden you have this black tree, scorched black tree in front of you. Okay, so that's taking you from point B or point C, depending on how you view it, because at point A you just looked up and saw the mountains in the distance. So you're going from that point where you're at the base of the mountains, and now you're at the tree. Okay, it's there in front of you. Then silver oozes from the tree's green buds. Liquid metal runs down twigs and branches, hardening around the roots like glittering ice. So then the visualization changes, your imagination changes. So you experience this tree with the oozing metal. All right, so you can see this is going from point A, teleporting to point B, teleporting to point C, teleporting to point D, etc., etc., etc. All right. Then, if we go into Condensed Magic by Phil Hines, I'm going to read this entire section for you because it's pretty good. So he explains the 3 types of pathworkings. Let me just start. I'll start at the beginning. Assembling, and therefore creating such scenes constitutes the basis of what is known as pathworking. In this form, the magician constructs a narrative with a mythic or instructive subtext into which he steps, identifying with the experience to such an extent that it becomes personally meaningful. The assemblage of imagery can be undertaken consciously or can occur spontaneously, as the mind has an amazing capacity for constructing complex scenes using very little information. There are generally three types of pathworking: structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. He gives an example of a structured pathworking in Chapter 7. These pathworkings are complete narratives providing perceptual, emotional, and behavioral cues, which the user simply follows passively. These pathworkings are especially useful as training exercises, particularly when you are beginning to work with a belief system with which you are unfamiliar. These pathworkings are useful if read onto audio tape or, as is more usual, read by another person. Okay, book was written quite a while back, that's why I was talking about audio tapes. We don't use those anymore. Used to pass them around from magician to magician. Semi-structured pathworkings have less detail. They tend to... Okay, so the structured pathworkings are a very particular, detailed journey that you take. So as I said, you may find yourself on a path in a meadow. When I do pathworkings for people, I usually start in a meadow. And you're on a path. There's a path leading in front of you, and as you walk along the meadow, the sun's on your face, so you feel the heat and you feel the breeze. You hear the birds in the distance. There's wheat or long grass beside you, so you can run your hands through it, so you've got a sense of touch as well. So you have you start engaging all of the senses, and then you walk into a forest, and from the heat of the sun, then you walk into shade, so there's that contrast of heat and cooler temperature. You run your hands along the bark of the trees, so again, and you're smelling the flowers and smelling the greenery around you and the plants and the trees and things like that. You're hearing the birds and the animals. So you're engaging all the different senses along this path, so it immerses you more into the imagination. And with these particular pathworkings, what you're doing is you are trying to achieve a certain goal, a certain spiritual goal, and this becomes a ritual. So it may be that you walk along these paths for a while, and then you meet somebody and you have a conversation with them. It could be, one of the very first pathworkings I ever did, 30 years ago maybe. I remember it very clearly, actually. I actually went and met Pan, and so you go along this journey and you engage with a particular character. In my case, that first one was Pan, and you sit down and you have a conversation with them, and they may give you something as a gift. And all the pathworkings are different, but it allows you to immerse yourself in the imagination. And it allows you to immerse yourself in the journey itself, especially because you're engaging all of the senses. And through that, you're actually immersing yourself in an astral realm. When we talk about astral realms, we can talk about astral projection, where you're lying down and your double body, your astral body, your spirit, whatever we want to call it, is moving out of your physical or organic body. In some cases, people will say that the consciousness is moving out of the body and moving into a different plane or a different realm, a different sphere. But we can also take or engage with the astral realms through sitting and doing shamanic journeying or meditation, going into your astral temple, going into your inner temple. Many, 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 many ways to actually engage with the astral realms, engage with astral work. But this is one of them. You are immersing yourself in the imagination and into this astral place, this astral realm, where you are engaging with characters, gods, goddesses, spirits, fae, whatever it is. It depends on the culture, it depends on the teachings and the practices of the person who's guiding you. So, all different things you can do with pathworkings. Let me go on here. All right, so semi-structured pathworkings have less detail. They tend to begin with an entrance sequence which sets up the place or zone which is to be explored and what the point of you being there is, after which you are left to your own devices. For example, the narrator leads you to a strange castle, giving you enough perceptual cues to build the imagery, and then tells you that you must look for someone who will give you a key to your own magical power, after which you're on your own. This approach gives you more freedom of movement and creativity within the exercise. So that's kind of very much what I was talking about just now. So you are led to a particular point, and then you meet a character who is you're going to engage with. So you're going to sit down and have a conversation. You're going to ask them for a particular thing. They may give you a particular thing. Whereas the first one, the structured pathworking, is a very particular, take you in, do a particular thing, and bring you out. Okay. Unstructured or spontaneous pathworkings may consist of a single 3-dimension image, such as a tarot card or even a rune or I Ching hexagram. The idea here is to use the symbol or image as a doorway or gate and to project yourself through it into a mythic landscape which lies beyond it. This is actually, that's used by a lot of people. I remember first coming across this type of method with Golden Dawn teachings, where you actually take a tarot card and you you get into a trance state, and then you visualize this huge big tarot card in front of you, the imagery of the tarot card, and you then step into the scene itself. And if you look at a tarot card, you could even use that in a very similar way to what Theodore Rose does, where you are, it's a particular scene in the tarot card, and it may have some depth to it. So just trying to think, Two of Wands, for instance, where the man is standing on a hilltop or a cliff, and he's looking out, and there is sea beyond, and then there's land beyond that. So you could actually take yourself from that point where the guy's standing with the 2 wands, 2 staves, and go into the sea and have a particular imagery there, and then go on to the land beyond. So you could skip yourself or transport yourself through the scenery of the tarot card itself. But this method is usually one where you imagine the tarot card and you use it as a gateway. So you imagine it like a door, and then you stand up astrally, and you then step into the scene of the tarot card. So, as I say, different ways to go about pathworking, different views on pathworking and what they are, pathworking compared to guided meditation and things like that. So, but the main thing is, it's a tool. It's something you can use to achieve a particular thing. So I think no matter what someone calls it and what they may argue this or that is, the main thing is use it for what it's supposed to be used for. All right, so that's it for this week. We will be back on Friday with the Black Hat Chat. I do apologise for anybody who was looking forward to it last Friday. I wasn't feeling well, I was a bit under the weather, so I had to cancel. But we will be back on Friday, and we will be doing the solstice live chat with the Black Hat Chat. So hopefully I'll see you then at 5 p.m. GMT. All right, otherwise I'll see you next week, Tuesday. Have a great one for now. Have a good week. And for anybody celebrating the solstice, happy solstice today. All right, so have a great one. Cheers for now.